Hi planty friend, it's me. Today I'm going to share with you 5 quick tips on growing and taking care of Hoyas. This applies to all Hoyas across the board, not just this one here, which happens to be a Hoya Royal Hawaiian Super Splash. The first tip I have is when you go shopping for a Hoya, try and choose a Hoya that is suitable for your household. So I live in Melbourne, and Melbourne weather can become very cold in winter and very hot in summer. This plant here grows very well in my household because I classify it as a non-fussy Hoya, which means that this Hoya, it doesn't really care about humidity. It can have high humidity or low humidity. It will still thrive in those conditions. Also, when it comes to the temperature, it can still grow between 10 degrees up to about 30 degrees, which is roughly around about 50 Fahrenheit all the way up to 90 Fahrenheit. There are other Hoyas which are classified semi-tropical Hoyas. They're the ones that require high humidity. They like humidity above 50% and temperatures above 60 Fahrenheit, which is roughly about 15 degrees. Then there are really fussy Hoyas, which are your tropical Hoyas. And they're the ones that love high humidity. And that's definitely above 60%. If you can go around about 70-80%, even better. They're the ones that require the humidity, because if they don't, the edges of the leaves can go brown. Also, the leaves can actually wilt and start to die and drop off. They also like warm temperatures, so they are very prone to the cold. So anything below 60, basically around, anything below really around about 60 Fahrenheit, and they don't like it at all. Also, the next tip I have is that if you like your Hoyas to bloom, then try and make the Hoya think it's dying. So what I mean by that is that Hoyas tend to like to be underwatered or go completely dry between watering. And if you want the Hoya to bloom or encourage it to bloom, then go that extra step and make it even drier. So when you think the plant is actually dry, give it like 3 or 4 more days before watering it. This kind of signals to the plant that it makes it think that it's dying, and so it's more likely to produce flowers. When it comes to these wiggly wank stems here, like this one and this one here, don't ever cut these stems. The reason for this is the new growth of the Hoya. If you cut this stem here, it's going to stunt the growth of the Hoya, and it's not going to be, the stem won't mature as quickly, and so it's unlikely also to bloom, because the blooms of a Hoya tend to grow on mature stems. The other tip I have is that when you actually want a lot of variegation, so a lot of Hoyas like this one here has pink specklings on it. Some of them have silver specklings or flecks on the leaves. If you want your Hoya to have more of those flecks, definitely pop in an area that receives as much bright indirect sunlight in your household as possible. I would go even a step further and place an area where it receives 2 to 3 hours of non-harsh morning sunlight. If you pop your Hoya in an area that receives direct afternoon sunlight, it may actually burn and scorch the leaves. So the best thing to do is to encourage the silver specklings on the leaves is to pop in the area that receives more indirect sunlight and just morning sunlight as well. When it comes to things like repotting, Hoyas love to be root bound. I say root bound, like literally there is no space left in the soil for the roots to grow. They don't like to have too much soil. First of all, that can encourage overwatering, and I'm happen to be an overwaterer, so I don't repot my Hoyas until it's absolutely necessary. And because they like to be root bound, that you don't really need to repot your Hoya for that often. I would definitely not repot it each year. I tend to repot my Hoya first when I check the roots are completely root bound, and 2, it's generally around about 2 or 3 years before I repot my plant, depending on the growth of my Hoya. The other tip I have is that when you choose a Hoya plant, I like my Hoyas to be bushy. I don't actually like my Hoyas to be that long and leggy. So what I tend to do is when I purchase my Hoya, I tend to choose the pot that has the most cuttings in it. And you can check, I mean, you can lift up the plant and check underneath the leaves and see and count how many plants are in the pot. And the more plants are in the pot, the fuller and the bushier the Hoya is going to be. So that's all the care tips and the tips of shopping I have for Hoyas. If you like more detail on how to take care of your Hoya, then watch this video next.